Well, one of the things that always interests me with Linux is my audience is very much the open source, free software crowd. The people who are very interested in, like, the licenses around the software they're using. But
Mm.
there are a lot of people out there, like the gaming audience, like people who use something like DaVinci, who just don't actually care about any of the like build up stuff around Linux, any of the what do you call it? The like politics of licenses or anything like that. They're just here to use good software. And it's always interesting to see the differences between channels because, as I said, mine's very much the free software crowd, but I'll go to
Mm.
someone like, I guess even your channel, there'll be a lot more people because you have done these videos on things like DaVinci, and various other people have done these videos where those people actually do exist as well. And it's easy to
Mm.
forget they do exist because I think the open source crowd, the free software crowd, are kind of the louder people in this space. Whereas the people who are just using software because it's software they want to use, they're too busy a lot of the time to be ranting about whether you want to have an
Mm.
MIT license or a copyleft style license.
Mm. Yeah, there's definitely a distinction in terms of people who are in the Linux community. So there is really, like you said, the open source enthusiasts basically, which
Mm,
also in some way contribute to the ecosystem. Like they look those licenses, they maybe do some reviews if someone makes a mistake. This is a very important part. But
mm,
but on the other hand, you have like all of the technical people who are just looking for something that works, that is
mm,
stable. So Linux is just a tool for them rather than an active environment.
mm,
That is especially true like in a business sense, I guess, whereas you have a server and you're not using Linux because it's open source,
mm,
you don't care what's actually happening in the background. You use Linux because it just works because it is stable.
mm.
And those people do exist, and they certainly have a space in the Linux community as well, because big companies obviously want to support their own products. And if a lot of people choose to use Linux because it works better in some way, then it's a good thing to gain those support,
Mhm.
even though they don't necessarily like to open source their stuff at first. But I think it's a growing matter,
Mhm.
not something that happens just overnight.
Yeah, that I think is definitely the key point. Really any change you want to make is going to be it's going to be a slow, gradual change over time. People will talk about, and this comes up every time that there is a Windows end of support period. Guys, there's going to be so many people that start using Linux, or like when more ads get injected into Windows. Guys, this is the time. Linux, it's finally gonna be the main thing on the desktop. And I get the enthusiasm, right? But it's not like that. It's gonna be
Mhm.
small increments every time. And there are absolutely people who stop using Windows because of the TPM stuff that happened, or when Windows 7 left support, or maybe 8 left support, or more ads being injected into Windows. But it's not millions of people, and that's fine, right? It's okay that you make these little dents at a time because if you look back at, say, I don't know, the start of Debian, the people using Linux back then were a very different crowd from what we see now. Back then, you realistically were going to be a programmer, or at least had some
Mhm.
sort of Unix background if you were using Linux. Then at some point Ubuntu came along and more regular sort of computer users could actually use their system. And I've talked about this before. If I couldn't play games on my system, I would not be a Linux user. And I've had some people try to say that like Steam and Proton, it hasn't been that big of a deal for Linux. And no, it really has been. Like, I don't have two computers and I don't want to dual boot.
Mhm.
I probably should set up a capture PC at some point. I know I should do that. But regardless, The fact that you can play games on the same system that you're using Linux on, you can game on your Linux system. For a lot of people, that was the last thing that pushed them over the edge. And then all of these little things that Windows does to make it so slightly worse pushes more people to at least maybe not swap, but at least try it out and see what it's like. And even though it's only a couple of people at a time, it's a couple of people at a time. And over the years, that adds up. And eventually, you have what we have now, where you have this fairly healthy ecosystem. It could certainly be better, and there are certainly funding issues that exist, and development issues, and bug triaging issues. But I think for the most part, we're in a pretty good state.
Yeah, I think so too, actually. And it's a really interesting discussion on the year of the Linux desktop and when it's finally going to happen. I mean, it will happen in some sense, but it's not like Linux will explode and everyone will just stop using Windows.
Right.
For me, the whole thing is the year of the Linux desktop will come as soon as you have like a sort of sortiment. How would I say it? Let's just put it like you have 50% Windows PCs and 50% Linux PCs in a store. At that point, I could say the Linux desktop is basically here simply because it's mainstream. And I think that's like the main thing is as soon as Linux becomes some sort of mainstream platform, it's the year of the Linux desktop. And in some way, we are already at the start of it because of the Steam Deck, and like people are using Linux even though they don't necessarily even know about it.
Right.
And I'm not talking about embedded systems and all that stuff.
Or like Chrome OS or Android. I guess you'd count those differently.
Yeah, those two are also a different thing. Like Chrome OS is almost a Linux distribution in the sense that we would talk about the Linux distribution. Android is a bit more in a tough spot because there's like so much in it that's different.
Right.
So then there is the whole argument on GNU/Linux and all the other things. But I agree.
Did my Steam start downloading something? No? Your camera just dropped in quality. I don't know whose side that's on. It's fine. I can still hear you fine. It's just you're now like 3 pixels.
Oh yeah, what the hell? 180p. That's fun.
It's fine.